Phil and I actually go way back to our occipital days, so it's always fun being around this scoundrel,
That's the first time anyone's ever said it's fun to be around me, so thank you.
Well, I mean, from a distance,
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to OpenCV Weekly Webinar. And today we have with us Jacob Ervin, who is the CEO of Active Replica. And we are going to talk about building social ecosystems through virtual worlds. So welcome, Jacob. We'll go through, a detailed introduction in just a bit. But first, let me also introduce you to Phil. I mean, he needs no introduction because he's been hosting the webinars for a very long time. And Phil is the Director of Content at OpenCV. And welcome, Phil.
Yeah, good morning, Satya. Welcome back, everybody. You got a warm welcome from the chat. We're glad to have you back. Everybody who's joining us again, I'm going to remind you of a few things that we do every week here on OpenCV Weekly Webinar, one of which is a special giveaway to you in the audience. Jacob has been so kind as to offer up either a 1-month subscription to Active Replica or an Active Replica t-shirt, so stay tuned for that later. We'll also be taking Q&A from you in the audience, so use the little Zoom Q&A button at the bottom of your screen or ask your question in the comments wherever you're watching, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitch, Twitter, etc. And we'll do our best to answer your questions during the flow of the show. We'll also save some time at the end to get to the ones that we don't get to normally. Yeah, that's it. Satya?
All right. So Jacob, it's your show. I mean, tell us a little bit about your background, and then we will go over the slides and go over the, what we'll hear from you about virtual worlds and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me here, Phil and Satya. Phil and I actually go way back to our occipital days, so it's always fun being around this scoundrel,
That's the first time anyone's ever said it's fun to be around me, so thank you.
Well, I mean, from a distance, No, it's good. So let's see, my background. I've been working in augmented and virtual reality since about 2009. Again, back in the days when you actually had to jailbreak the iPhone in order to get access to the camera to do basic, even the basic things. And worked at Mataio as a software engineer doing augmented reality back in the early teens. Worked on some HoloLens style prototypes along with Matt Meisnick's for a little Samsung subdivision. And ended up at Occipital with Phil building the Bridge headset, which was an open source, computer vision driven, mobile phone powered, augmented and mixed reality headset with its own little ecosystem of app developers and community there, which was really exciting. Then in 2019, I moved up here to Vancouver. And in 2020, something unusual happened, which we all know what I'm talking about.
Gosh, what was that?
I don't know, but suddenly everybody was stuck indoors a lot more than they had been previously. I met my co-founder up here pre-pandemic. Actually, and we were kind of hanging out socially. Another virtual reality enthusiast, somebody who had a background in location-based virtual reality. So what does it mean when you drop 10 people into the same room and have them all, sharing virtual experiences? And so when the pandemic hit, we were like, okay, maybe there's some sort of opportunity here for kind of emerging technology to help mitigate this feeling of everybody being home alone by themselves. Doesn't feel good. And we just started kind of doing a lot of user research then. So we were like, maybe realty, right? We looked into 3D scanners, people selling houses, you can do visits. Didn't really seem like the thing. Then we had this great idea of, oh, hey, all the museums are closed. Why don't we do photogrammetry of all the museums? Put the museums on, some sort of web-based social platform, and then people can do tours through the museums and have, kind of social experiences that way. That's where the name Active Replica came from, actually. And we built a little prototype and we pitched it to the museums, and they were like, God, we're hemorrhaging money. Please make it stop. No, we're not going to spend $1 on anything. No, And so no, we got rejected from all of the museums, but we did end up with this really interesting prototype, which was a virtual museum hosted through Mozilla Hubs, which is a web-based kind of social VR type platform. And we had a bunch of guests over to kind of tour the museum at one point, and we invited about 10 people to pop by one time to kind of like tour this little web-based museum. And 2.5 hours later, we had about 25 people in the room. We had to sign off. We had to kick people out of the party, basically. And we're like, okay, all right, maybe there's something here, you know? And that's how we got our first gig, actually. Somebody who had been invited by somebody who had been invited was like, oh my God, this is so cool. You know, we have an in-person event that got canceled for 150 teens. Can you build us a virtual world and help us connect our community through this virtual space? And so that's how we got our start into kind of the virtual world ecosystem.
That's great.
Quick little opening sequence, anyways.
Yes, and for full disclosure purposes, I also worked a little bit with Active Replica before I joined OpenCV.
Yeah, a man of many hats.
All right, so let's get started on the presentation.
Yeah, sure. I'll so with that kind of a background, I'll give and how I think I would be interested in this going today is I have just a few slides about who Active Replica is and what we're doing within kind of the like emerging web. I'm going to call it the metaverse. We can complain about that a little bit later in the podcast. But I'll talk a little bit about who we are and what it is we're doing within this ecosystem of organizations. Then I'd actually kind of like to pull back a little bit and look at the broader series of organizations. There's a lot of really interesting companies out there right now building protocols to kind of power the open web, specifically like the open immersive web. And I'd like to talk about just like why do I believe the web is going to be the place where the like actual metaverse kind of emerges out of. So yeah, let's see. Okay. Can everyone see my screen here?
Yes.
Yeah, looks good.
All right, cool. So yeah, I'm just going to have a quick little chat here about building social ecosystems using virtual worlds and like what that means, right? I already gave my kind of a little spiel, you know, background as a software engineer, moved into product management, and now co-founded Active Replica with my co-founder Valerian Dennis. And you know, we've got a really great team, about half of them based here in Vancouver, British Columbia. But we're fully remote for like, even though we're all located in the city, we're remote first, and we have people all around the world helping us out on this. So yeah, so we're in the middle of a really exciting evolution, I think. So just to kind of jump right into it, which is that in the early days of the pandemic and everybody being stuck at home, there was a lot, kind of this like explosion of virtual worlds, right? And there's a lot of value that came out of that, right? Helping people connect in a way that they weren't able to connect through Zoom, right? You know, like Zoom is great for these kind of things. Like, hey, there's 3 of us. When I stop talking, one of you guys can stop talking, and that all works really well. Where video conferencing fails, and this is where, you know, platforms like GatherTown or Kumo Space have really stepped in, is hosting social events is more difficult, you know, through the traditional platforms. And so we saw this kind of like plethora of virtual world providers coming out and offering a lot of free virtual spaces, but that's just not enough, right? Like at the end of the day, having access to a 3D virtual world, if you drop into a 3D virtual world, you like look around, like, okay, cool, that's neat, and you leave. Just to actually, maybe before I jump into this, just to give people a 10-second demo of what I'm talking about. So for example, this is our activereplica.io. It's a website, right? So you can drop to it. And then it's basically like a little browser-based virtual world here that, you know, you can explore kind of using, you know, WASD and your arrow keys. But it's also social, and it has spatial audio, right? So anybody else, if it's the same URL, will drop in as well. You can have up to about 30 people in a room, and daisy chain multiple rooms together, portal between different rooms, all of those different things. Oh, hey, got Phil right there. There you go.
That's me. You know. Hey, everybody.
Hey, Phil.
So when you say spatial audio, it actually let's say a person is very far away, they are going to be muted compared to somebody who is very close by, right? And also directional.
Exactly, yeah. So if we had 30 people in the room and I was standing here having a conversation with Phil,
yeah,
I might be able to overhear a conversation further on down the thing. And if I got bored of my conversation with Phil, I could politely excuse myself and move over to the table where the other conversation was happening. You know,
which has also never happened before.
It's true. Terrible example. Yeah,
actually, there's another very important reason why spatial audio is useful in these virtual worlds, is that let's say all the audio is coming. If you don't have spatial audio, you cannot actually decipher. It sounds like noise.
Cacophonous.
When multiple people are talking. Yeah. And as soon as you have spatial audio, it becomes, I mean, it's still a little bit noisy, but at least you're able to decipher, you're able to focus on one person, even if they may be far away. If you want to focus on some person, you can focus on that particular person and tune out other people. This is, I mean, I saw a demo at a large company. I don't know whether I signed an NDA where I cannot reveal much, but I saw some demo of the spatial audio, and it was just eye-opening, or maybe it was ear-opening.
No, you're absolutely right.
And the other, maybe, yeah.
And I see that actually one of our, it seems like probably one of the guests from the webinars dropped in and is also exploring right now. And that's one of the things that is really exciting to me about web-based virtual worlds, is the accessible nature of it, right? There's no app to download. There's nothing to install. There's no accounts to create unless you want to limit access to your room. And so with a single click, people are able to drop in and start exploring and start having conversations with each other through these virtual worlds as well.
Actually, CVPR, which is one of our top conferences, is going on right now. And one of the, it has grown big. Now it is, just 10 years back, it used to be about 1/10 of the size it is right now. And one of the complaints people have these days is that to see a single poster, they cannot get to the poster. There is such a big crowd, especially if the poster is popular. They cannot even go and talk to the author because it's so crowded. And this kind of virtual experience can really help in those scenarios, right? You still get a sense of, oh, you're going to this conference, etc. But maybe you can delete some of the people from the crowd and, have a better experience than in real life, where you're literally elbowing people out.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, even, I mean, you can talk about the accessible nature for it for people who are either unable or have difficulty traveling. But then you still get a much more personal type of reaction than through Zoom. Again, like when you're having, I think what I've found is that you have a lot more organic conversations when you're hosting a live event like this, as opposed to in Zoom being moved into a breakout room or something like that. The other thing that
there's
find
also good stuff like the serendipity of just you catch something out of the corner of your eye, and now there's something else to kind of talk about for a second while you think about what you were just talking about. Like those sorts of little bits of serendipity really add, like they're irreplaceable, I feel.
That's very true. And the other thing that we've found is also a sense of identity, right? Like whether it's one of these conferences or one of the organizations that we work with, when you're in video conferencing, you don't have a sense of location and mood and ambiance and like, who am I with and why am I here, right? Whereas that's something that space making is actually a real art, obviously dating back tens of thousands of years. And so we work with architects on our team, to say like, what are we communicating through the choices of the spaces that we're making, and how do we engage people through these virtual spaces, and help build up again a sense of identity for a particular organization. I can see that we have more folk wandering around here. Y'all are welcome.
Yeah, feel free. It's that URL is activereplica.io. Once again, if folks in the audience want to go poke around, it's relatively safe. I think you'll be okay.
We usually don't fight. But that said, again, just having a virtual world isn't enough. What we'll find here, I think if we left this open, is people will wander around for about 5 minutes and then they'll leave, right? Especially people who don't know each other. What really engages people is having a virtual event, right? And so having a a run of show, having things happening, having people presenting, having things to do, treasure hunts, whatever. But it's a lot of work, right? It's a lot of work to program these events, and it's a lot of work to actually get people to show up. And when you have nothing to do, you end up with a ghost town, right? And so looking at basically all of the kind of keystone virtual world providers out there. I don't want to say that, like obviously VR Chat is into Ghost World, and Altspace VR is doing some really great work, and there's a lot of thriving communities out there. But given the hundreds of different virtual world providers out there, what we're finding is that ones that are driven purely by the visuals of their virtual worlds have very low engagement and very low retention. And so one of the things that we're looking at doing and are currently in the process of doing is taking all of this is kind of a selection of some of our customers here currently. Is we're working on the process right now of taking these kind of like siloed different organizations, each of which are hosting their own events, are using their own persistent virtual worlds to engage with their communities. We work with a lot of social institutions. We work with a lot of educational institutions, and we're starting to actually link them up. So each of these different organizations right now for us has, their own dedicated URL. They have their own virtual world. They host their own virtual events through it. And what we're going to begin doing is opening portals, or we've begun doing, and we're going to start talking about it more publicly, is opening portals between these different organizations and letting them share resources, letting them broadcast their events to partner nodes, letting them also, we're going to be doing things like job fairs and scholarship fairs to actually give value to the members of these different organizations.
That's really interesting to me as an old guy, because it reminds me very much of MUDs and MUXes. I don't know how many people out there played like Telnet text-based adventure community games back in the day, but this sort of bidirectional communication, this layout specifically, this is basically what a map of a MUD, a multi-user dungeon from 1987 or 1990 would look like. And that's really interesting to me because it's kind of foundationally building on something that existed before, that there's we learned a bunch of stuff already, right? Like you don't need to completely reinvent the wheel for this stuff. You can look to the past to help, create the future.
Exactly. And I mean, the way that I see all technology is like an evolution and an iteration, right? Like, I don't think that this is the end of the line. We're going to build this and we're going to say, cool, we're done, right? It's always going to be this evolving process where, the past is brought into the present, and what did we learn from that? And what are we uncovering now for the first time? And one of the things that's really exciting to me about building on top of Mozilla Hubs is that it's an open source platform built by Mozilla. So we have our own fork of it, for example. But at the end of the day, it's a web-based virtual world platform. And there's dozens of other organizations building their companies and powering different organizations through Mozilla Hubs. And there's also a lot of other third-party kind of like open metaverse folk as well. Okay. Actually, apparently this is the metaverse verse. But but yeah, and so the first step kind of being
the metaverse. I mean,
it's that's actually a trademark. Please do not infringe on our metaverse trademark.
Web 3.1.
Exactly. But so right now what we're doing is we're linking together a bunch of organizations within kind of the Active Replica network. But then there's also this plethora of other folk building on top of Hubs Cloud as well. And there are other, web-based, accessible, URL-driven protocols and platforms out there as well. And I think in the zeitgeist, there's a lot of different companies right now talking about web-based protocols to enable communication between these different virtual world providers, which we're really excited to be kind of having a conversation with some of these folk. And it's still the early days right now, but I do think that there's a world in which we get a metaverse that looks much more like the web than I think some of the like siloed app-based platforms that are currently out there on the market. One group that just we crossed paths with a few times recently is the Croquet folk. So Croquet is building a JavaScript-based system, and one of the really neat features is the ability to basically have kind of like iframe style portals, right? Where you can just paste a link. It creates a portal into your space. So the Alice, for example, is on a different URL on a different provider, and being able to move seamlessly without a page reload or anything like that in between different instances run by different companies, but with the experience for the user being completely frictionless, right? And while this is obviously still in the early days right now, we're seeing a number of organizations similar to Croquet, like Immersed Space, for example, doing some really great work in terms of building the protocols that we think are going to power this kind of like open metaverse of the as we kind of enter the mid-2020s.
Do these? I'm guessing that these platforms, Mozilla Hub, the coding is done using JavaScript, or what is how do you build these?
Yeah, so a number of folk are using JavaScript. Hubs is primarily based on A-Frame and React with like a reticulum sublayer. And currently, mostly it's easiest to set up your own Hubs cloud instance on AWS. But there are folk out there like Will from Standard Magic, I believe, who are working on moving on other opportunities as well in terms of having more control over the Hubs cloud stack specifically. But yeah, no. So I'd say like A-Frame is one of the primary tools that's driving this. Frame VR, for example, is another one of the major players in the ecosystem right now. And they are, I believe, built on Babylon JS, JavaScript library, I believe. Yeah, so there's some really great work being done here.
Yeah, it's JavaScript all the way down.
Is there any work being done to make, computer vision based? Right now, it looks like you can have the avatar, the voice is obviously transmitted, and you can talk and things like that. But can you actually control the avatar using your own body and gesture and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are two specific projects that are coming up to mind. Let me see if I can remember the name of them. 1 second. Valencia James. So one of them is this Valencia James is a researcher and artist currently, and a dancer currently at Berkeley, I believe. Let me see if I can find their work. They've been doing, here we go, the volumetric performance toolkit. This is what I'm looking for. 1 second. Excuse me as I frantically Google in front of you all. But this volumetric performance toolkit was built by Valencia James and her co-founder. And what they're doing is they're taking, I believe it might be a Azure Connect, and they're punching it into Hubs, right? So they're doing live volumetric capture and live volumetric streaming into these web-based systems. And so this isn't necessarily avatar rigging, right? But this is taking off-the-shelf depth sensors and projecting it for the purposes of entertainment and performance art, essentially. So that's I was actually hoping to get one of their team on this call as a co-host, but wasn't able to quite swing it. And then there are also people who are doing full body rigging using traditional 2D cameras. So rigging a full body avatar from a camera. We also have, and this isn't unfortunately on the computer vision side of things, but a number of folk are also doing full body mocap into Mozilla Hubs as well. So this is Unwired Dance Theater. They're doing a bunch of live performances where, again, they'll start off with actually a 2D screen. They have a full body mocap suit, and then they'll step into the virtual world as this avatar and engage with people who have, again, come to one of the performances, often hosted by Onboard XR, which is kind of an anthology of virtual performers experimenting with this web-based platform.
And I'm pretty certain that there are companies that are looking at creating avatars that look like you based on videos or pictures of you, right?
Yeah, so we actually have, that's a really good point. We actually have a partnership here with Ready Player Me. And so Ready Player Me is one of the more popular avatar creators out there, where exactly like you're saying, it takes a photo of you. It takes about 10 seconds or so, and then it generates a human-looking avatar right away, just with a single click. And it's it's not perfect, but in terms of making human style avatars much more accessible, again, they're really doing a lot to remove the friction from avatar creation, which is obviously, like, human representation in virtual worlds is obviously one of the key technological challenges that it's not something that you can just like brute force,
Right. So what's the name of this tool again?
Yeah, so this is called readyplayer.me. They have a number of development partners. We have them integrated directly into our platform as well, so that I don't have a demo of that right now, but in July, you'll be able to click create name and avatar, and the pop-up that you just saw over here will actually show up within the virtual world, so you won't need to go to another page. Right now, if I wanted to actually set this as my avatar, I would bring up this little pop-up. We'll give it a minute here. Copy the link, and then change my name and avatar. Oh, I didn't even have my face on. It's embarrassing. Let's see. There you go. And so now if I put a camera into the scene, you can see that now I have the Ready Player Me avatar that I just created. And so again, that whole process of creating an avatar and getting it set up here took less than a minute,
It's a far cry from, I'm sure you remember days at Occipital where some of our clients there were building apps to do, really high definition 3D capture of people's heads and bodies. And, they got pretty great results eventually, but you needed, a pretty fancy iPad. You needed the extra hardware with structure sensor, and you would still, I don't think people actually want to look like themselves. I think that's what we found out, is that they want to look like they want to be themselves, but that doesn't necessarily mean they look exactly like they look in like real life. And I think that is an important part of this as well.
Well, and one of the things that we're learning about doing a lot of work in these virtual worlds, and especially with the like human looking avatars, is that I think there's so many facial expressions, there's so many ways that we cock our head or raise our eyebrow that are really run close to the metal in terms of our systems looking for cues and information from other human beings, right? And it's obviously, I know I'm just kind of describing the uncanny valley, but when there's something that looks quite human, but it's giving off the wrong signals, it's very confusing, right?
Yeah.
So even, for example, using Ready Player Me, there are subtle things like the eyes of the avatar move around, right?
Yeah, it does just the idle kind of, like a person's do, because your eyes never really sit still. It's creepy. If you ever met someone whose eyes don't move, it's terrifying.
Exactly. No, and so these subtle little human elements that they're adding are really help you feel much more engaged with the person across from you. But at the same time, things like eye movement actually have a big impact, right? If somebody's telling you a very personal story and you look away for a couple of seconds, like that's communicating something, right? And so there's this there's noise being added into the system that is making relating to each other more difficult. And it's the same thing with video conferencing, right? You know, I think we're so hardwired for things like, if I say something and the other person pauses before they speak, that means something, right? Even though that pause was just that wire going between Vancouver and San Francisco, was a little bit cluttered at that moment, but like my system is picking up cues based off of eye movements, pauses, delays, things like that, and it's definitely not a solved problem yet.
And that's, of course, there's also, you know, there's a spectrum of understanding of those things too. You know, some people do not do well with eye contact or reading faces or getting those subtle cues as well. And so I think that's, you know, an important aspect of this, all these avatars and creations and stuff as well, is that like you can talk to those people still, I think. Go ahead, Jacob.
Actually, so that reminds me, so coming back to the kind of like protocol driven collaboration and how there's a lot of really interesting companies building on top of you know, WebXR and specifically Mozilla Hubs. I want to highlight Virgil's over here because it's exactly that. They're specifically using hubs and virtual worlds to help connect therapists with autistic teen boys, right? Who often have difficulty sitting one-on-one facing a therapist and having a conversation, right? But by kind of like meeting youth who have difficulty socializing where they feel comfortable, they're really finding a lot of value both for the teens, for the parents, because it gives them kind of like a channel in which to start communicating and having these conversations. I don't know, just like
that's really great.
You using hubs to help engage teens who have difficulty socializing, and by meeting them where they're at, I think it's really exciting, and just one example of the dozens of different companies that are being built on hubs right now. Yeah, but just again, so again, because you're exactly right. Like some people aren't super comfortable socializing one-on-one, sitting facing somebody else, and like, what are the tools that we have kind of in our tool belt to help support them? Speaking of tools, I've got one or two other little things over here. You know, we're building a couple of interesting systems for within our own network about like safety and security and broadcasting, and how do you know where you're going, providing context and information about basically the destination on the other end of some of these portals, right? How many people are there? Is the room locked? Is there something happening? What am I allowed to do? What are my permissions? Things like that. We're building a simple protocol system for hubs cloud to hubs cloud transference of like names and avatars. I think that at the end of the day, this will most likely be overwritten by something like immerse space. I think that's misspelled. I'll find it later. But there are other folk making broader protocols, but you know, in the meantime, we're prototyping some of our own internal ways to help bring these communities together. And then I also want to talk just a little bit about the type of organizations that we've found really interesting to work with. So one of the things about going back to the ghost town conversation, one of the things about building persistent virtual worlds is we've found that there are particular types of organizations that find a lot of benefit from having a virtual space and a virtual identity and a virtual gathering point. And a lot of these are cultural and community organizations, right? So, for example, we work with Ethos Lab, which is a Black-focused youth organization here in Vancouver, Canada. They just launched their physical location quite recently, where they're helping teach Black youth STEAM and getting them their own metaverse platform that they can repaint, strip the walls, own, is really helping turn these teens from kind of like consumers into creators, which I think is something that's really exciting. And so they make really regular use of this this virtual world because they feel like they have a sense of agency over it, and it's something that isn't a ghost town or a dusty closet or anything like that. It's something that like is actually quite useful, and we see a really exciting opportunity to connect with a number of kind of like cultural institutions and organizations as well. So, for example, we worked with the Federation of Francophone Canadians to help build a museum to showcase the different regions of Canada and their French history. And so moving into the fall, we're going to be able to take some of these community organizations, which have groups of youth, groups of teens, groups of particular demographics, and take them on tours through some of these different cultural institutions, which we're also helping build virtual worlds for. And so I think, again, kind of looking at the ecosystem of opportunities, if you only have your own virtual world as an organization, that gets stale pretty quickly. But as soon as you start kind of increasing that network and increasing that web, you have more opportunities to engage with the members of your organization. Simply by being part of the network. And so it's like a symbiotic relationship. This museum is going to be able to get visitors, and the community organization is going to have new and exciting things to do and new places to go. And so at the end of the day, both organizations benefit from having this communication between them.
Yeah, that's great.
So this is just kind of like the little end piece, which is, again, like one of the things that we're really excited for is this kind of like organically traversable ecosystem, right? So if you spawn into one node, being able to jump over to another node and then find your way, basically, like what are the neighbor organizations of this, right? Like, this is for example, I don't want to talk about any of the organizations that we haven't signed yet, but we're talking with a number of other kind of like cultural institutions, and being able to hit a museum and then jump over to, hey, this is their partner museum in a different province or in a different state. And then from there, find maybe local organizations that are connected with that, I think is really, really exciting.
It's almost like going through links, from one page to another.
Exactly. And this is one of the things that like doesn't really exist right now in the like quote unquote metaverse. I mean, it does within little clusters, right? But like if I go to VR chat, for example, I pull up a 2D UI of all of the different events that are happening, and then I drop into one of those worlds, and then I go back and I pull up the list of other worlds that are available, and I kind of jump into another world. And so it's like a long hallway with a bunch of rooms in it, right? And we don't really have, there isn't something right now where it's more organic and bottoms up in terms of, like you said, like almost like the early days of the internet, when like there weren't the major search engines, and you had to kind of find your way around.
Yeah, go to the Yahoo homepage. How else would you know it is on the internet?
Exactly. I mean, I still have AOL chat as my primary mode of communication. So,
ICQ over here. ICQ.
But then one other thing that we're really excited to do, that we're going to be running this fall, end of August, early September, is then taking this kind of cluster of organizations that are all working with us and hosting a job and education fair, right? So once we have several hundred regular active members, again, a lot of these are teams who are interested in emerging technology. And here in British Columbia right now, we actually have a huge need for more highly skilled tech workers, specifically within the emerging technology field. And so we believe that by bringing together educational institutions, industry folk who can offer jobs and internships, and these kind of like emerging technology focused youth groups, we're going to be able to build a really exciting series of opportunities for kind of everybody involved. That's also something that we'll be talking about more pretty soon. I think that's the end of my slides. I'm happy to keep clicking around and talking about some more interesting folk in the space, but also happy to just kind of chat and review too.
So one question I have is, people who are new to these, suppose I have no experience in these virtual worlds, etc. So what are the things that, where can one get started, right? What is the first step? What are the technologies they need to know about, and even programming, even programming languages? Is JavaScript all that one needs to know, or what are the other things that people need to know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, programming JavaScript is really helpful. Also, all of the backbone of a lot of these virtual worlds is also 3D modeling, right? And GLBs and GLTF are kind of the de facto model format right now that a lot of folk are working with. And it's really one of the exciting things for me too, is that a lot of the kind of like open web metaverse ecosystem is actually driven by Blender, which is another open source modeling program as well. And so, I think what we've seen right now from a lot of these web-based platforms is that Blender is the kind of de facto tool that everybody is using, and that it's kind of running laps around a lot of the more expensive proprietary kind of like film-based systems that I think even 5 years ago people were predominantly using. But yeah, you can get started with Mozilla Hubs just by going to hubs.mozilla.com and creating your own virtual world there. Setting up your own Hubs instance is a little bit more complicated, but there's A-Frame is a technology that I would really highly recommend. Babylon.js, they're doing some really fantastic work over there. And those are both really great places to get started.
So if I go to these, your webpage, for example, using Oculus Quest 2, will it give me that virtual experience?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So, this, and that's again one of the exciting things for me about kind of the like open web metaverse is when you're in headset, you're going to be able to navigate away from the page that you're on to another page without even necessarily needing to know the information about the other page that you're going to, right? Because right now, like if you're within VR chat, you can go to any VR chat rooms, but you're not able to leave the VR chat ecosystem, right? Whereas in a web-based VR-specific context, you're going to be able to put on your headset, and you can do this right now, go to activereplica.io, wander around, and then portal out to the Virgil's group, for example, and then eventually, who knows where you might end up. And the sense of like exploration and discovery is something that I think isn't, I haven't encountered very much right now in the current kind of again, metaverse as it exists.
Right.
Yeah, it's a really, I think it's a really interesting time for this. It's been a trial by fire for these virtual event companies and projects. And as always happens, some of them get burned and some of them emerge more powerful. And I think Mozilla Hubs has done a great job of they sort of started a little bit before everything really kicked off with regards to the pandemic. And they've done a really good job of prioritizing, I think, what to work on in order to get the most benefit to people during this time. And it's really cool. And it's open source. Like most of the things we talked about today are open source, which is awesome. Blender, Python open source, another victory for Python open source projects.
But rolling back just a minute, again, kind of talking about virtual event companies and kind of 3D world providers and stuff like that. I think there was a bit of a gold rush in 2020 and early 2021 when it was like hard lockdowns. Everybody was stuck in front of their computers. We were all on Zoom 24/7, and everybody was looking for any sort of hint of novelty. And it was just very easy to go out and say, "Hey, give me 20 grand, 50 grand for a virtual world." Boop, cool, everybody's happy. Now in a kind of, I'm going to call it post-COVID context, right, where it's summer outside, right? Like I don't want to be in front of my computer at the best of times, and like COVID's over, we're not in lockdown. I think there's a like the high tide is going out, and what we're finding now is that the organizations who are simply built on, hey, we're going to give you a 3D model and let you look around it, are seeing much lower retention than the types of organizations that are actually providing real value to the members, right? So, for example, one of the reasons why we're working on this kind of mesh of organizations the way that we are is we sat down and we spoke with a lot of our customers, right? And specifically, so taking Ethos Labs, for example, I sat down with the director of Ethos Labs and said, like, virtual worlds aside, what really matters to you? And she said, I really want to get the teens into post-secondary education, and I want to get them internships in the industry, right? Like I want to take these kids who are interested in science and technology, and I want to help them get to whatever that next stage is, right? And then it was really interesting because then we spoke with some of our educational partners, and they said, we really see virtual worlds as a really great way to engage with teens who are like plugged in and get it, and are like already thinking about this and getting them into our educational programs for emerging technology. We're like, oh, okay, so this is interesting. And then again, talking with our emerging technology industry partners, and they're saying, hey, we see this as a really great opportunity for recruiting. We have a huge talent crunch right now. And we're like, oh, okay, so all of the different legs of the tripod, actually the most beneficial thing that we could even offer is their connection with each other. And so that's one of the reasons why we've been really exploring these kind of like holistic ecosystems where we're able to create relationships between these different types of organizations.
Awesome. Let's I'm going to take a pause here. We'll do our giveaway. So everybody out there in the Zoom audience, we will be doing a giveaway of either your choice, either a t-shirt, an Active Replica t-shirt, or a 1-month subscription to Active Replica's services. The way this works is I'm going to ask a question based on Jacob's presentation, and you in the Zoom audience are going to try to answer that question. The first person that answers that question correctly will win what I just described. If you have won one of our giveaways in the last 2 months, please do not answer and give other people a chance to win. So get ready to answer. As Satya likes to say, that's not his rule, it's my rule.
That's his rule. I'm very capitalist. Winner takes all.
I'm a mean old man. I'm a mean old anarchist. So during the presentation here, we talked a lot about web technology, specifically how JavaScript is used. What did we describe as the most used JavaScript library for this sort of work? Oh, you guys are close. Close. This is a good one. I need to ask more JavaScript questions. Oh.
OpenCV does have a JavaScript version.
We shout out to the Node for JS, so OpenCV for Node people, by the way. Yeah, none of these. You all are close. I'll give you a hint. It starts with an A. Adam, thank you. Adam correctly answered A-frame. We mentioned that one the most and first. Adam, please send one email to phil@opencv.org, and we will, if you want a t-shirt or Active Replica subscription, up to you, let me know, and we'll make sure it happens for you. We've got a bunch of questions from the audience here. Let's go to some audience questions, shall we? Steve Simpson, a brief note, would like to know, are you presenting at the VRTO event in July, Jacob?
Not myself, but one of our close collaborators, Ari Tar, who's a virtual performer. I might actually plug a show that he has coming up here in a few minutes. He does a lot of work on virtual embodiment and how we can have avatars that help reflect the humanness of us. And he's currently doing a workshop on how we can use Japanese tea ceremony in order to calm our limbic systems when we're in virtual worlds. He's going to be at VRTO and kind of representing Active Replica while he's there. So
that's very interesting. Yeah, shout out to Toronto. I lived there for several years, as many people here know. One of my favorite cities. I need to visit one of these days again.
Would it be okay if I just post a link to the event? It's going to be hosted on Active Replica that Ari Tar will be hosting.
You can post whatever the hell links you want.
Right, cool. Here, so just for the person who's going to VRTO, feel free to drop by this immersive performance next week if you want, and he'll be presenting at VRTO. So
awesome, thanks. Yeah, we'll add this to the show notes as well. A question for me is, have you seen anybody integrating cooperative or competitive video games into these Mozilla hubs or other virtual event spaces in a really compelling way?
Yes to the first part of your question, no to the second part of your question. So there are some folk, for example, Frame VR, for example, recently launched a little basketball simulator where you can pick one up and shoot it and make hoops and have the score ding over, and it's cool. I know the Immerse Space also have a fully playable gigantic chess set where you can sit there with another person and kind of play chess. I really do think that gamification is one of the things that's kind of the immersive web is weak on right now and has a lot of opportunity when you start adding more gamification elements into it to be much more engaging. What we're finding right now is that there's the way to do it, though, is it's not that it's tricky, right? But what we end up doing often is playing with people the same way that we would in a real world scenario, right? So we often have a host. For example, we do a quiz night where there's a host. We bring in an audience of attendees, break them into teams. Everybody puts on a different avatar. The host asks questions, mocks the participants, spawns in 3D models, things like that. But it's human led and not kind of like programmatic, essentially. And so what we found is that the same sort of things that you might do at a pub night, quiz night, or something like that are the types of things that are really compelling at this stage.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you know my kind of history with this, going back to what we discussed toward the beginning of the webinar, with the bridge headset that we worked on at Occipital, when we both worked at Occipital. The first, I think I made the first technically complete game for that headset, which was the basketball game. You could it was just two models, a hoop and a ball, and you could do a quick 3D scan of your space with the structure sensor on an iPad, and then put a backboard wherever you wanted, and then grab a ball with the controller and just shoot hoops. It would bounce and land on the floor, and the arc you released it at actually mattered and stuff like that. And it was really compelling. That's what made your mentioning that other project made me think of this. I got to check that out, and it was really cool. There's also an aspect of this, and I think this is crucial, that it's the kind of thing you can do while you're having a conversation. You can have, like basketball, like just shooting hoops, playing horse, right? You don't have to be playing one-on-one. You might just be shooting hoops or having a catch, or and then just having a conversation with your friends. And that, again, I've used this phrase earlier, it's irreplaceable. You can't replicate it any other way. You have to be doing something and talking. And to be able to do that, there has to be mechanics for that. Again, you can even make them up yourself. We kind of did this in one of your active replica things. I recall we were just throwing a ball around at one point, and that was really fun.
Now, this goes actually back to Ari Tar's workshop that he's going to be hosting, that I posted the link to. And one of his core theses that he explored at the University of New York, NYU, New York University, is that essentially socially, there's almost no situations in where you are sitting 6 inches from somebody's face, looking directly at each other, unless you're in a very intimate moment or you're about to start fighting. And so basically, if you're one-on-one,
or first one, call, then the other.
There you go. Either way. And so there's parts of our brain that are kind of like, it's part of the Zoom fatigue, right? But we're not sure how to react when we're staring directly into somebody's face in such close proximity. And that's why having something to be doing, or again, through these virtual worlds, being able to walk down a hallway and have a conversation, treats our nervous system better than I think a lot of the video conferencing based approaches that we take currently.
Yeah, just like going for a walk with somebody where you're standing side by side, you're not like looking at each other. Like,
I mean, that's how I walk down the street.
Why do you think I haven't invited you over? But that's not to use too much of a $5 word, but the verisimilitude. It's your body cares about that stuff in ways you don't necessarily know, and that's really, really interesting. Another question from the audience here. Steve would like to know, have you seen anybody integrating, say, a commodity, really affordable, powerful, smart AI camera like, say, OakD into Mozilla Hubs or these other, how are folks doing these motion captures aside from just using their headset and maybe some tracked controllers?
Yeah, so there are the full body mocap suits, like the film level ones. There are the depth cam based systems that like Valencia James used. Again, I believe they were using an Azure Connect because their project was launched, I believe, in early 2019, so a little bit older. And then I do know that, again, there's that like pose reconstruction of like full avatar puppeteering from cameras. I don't know what cameras those are, those projects specifically are using, but there is definitely an intersection point between like the computer vision hardware and these virtual worlds that I think we're only going to see more and more exploration of as the years progress.
Yeah, I could see OAK-D, especially an OAK-D Lite, being really beneficial here because it's not going to slow your computer down for one. If you've got a low, like some lower end hardware, you can join an active replica room even on like a lower end phone. We've seen people, like a track phone kind of level tech, and they're fine. But if you want to have those higher fidelity experiences where maybe eye tracking, maybe even just like chest up tracking, there's awesome already extant AI libraries and models to run that stuff, lightning fast, real time, and just feed that JSON data over into your hubs world, and Bob's your uncle.
Yeah, no, I think we're going to see a lot more of that, especially as we move into late 2022 and early 2023.
And shout out to our often sponsors at Microsoft Azure. Hi, Sharon. We've got a couple. I have another question here from me, which is, what is the thing that has surprised you most that you've seen other people doing this year with the industry you work in? Positive surprise, not. We don't have to talk about Mark Zuckerberg at all here. We can...
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's really exciting for me and a bit surprising is how many niches are being filled through this kind of technology, right? I think it's easy to say like, hey, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? But like, again, the Virgil's people out there building these kind of like therapy sessions for autistic teams to connect with therapists. Like, cool. It's so great that there's plug and play technology where they didn't need to go and build the entire web stack in order to be able to do this. But because they had that web stack available, they were able to find this really unique solution for it. Same thing with folks out there building virtual classrooms. There are people doing virtual theme parks. And just the number of experiments that are able to be run because of kind of the like open sourced platforms that are being made available is not something that I would have assumed,
Right. Yeah. Another shout out from me to Antonia Forster, the LGBTQ plus VR museum. I just saw that this week on CNN or something. It was extremely, very, very cool project. Like, kind of just, gives you goosebumps, right? Like makes your face flush. You're like, wow, it's really, really powerful thing.
And again, talking about the importance of like architecture and space, right? Again, looking at some of the fly-throughs up there, we can really see the amount of love that got put into that project, and the sense of identity that project has is really, really compelling.
Yeah, I agree. We're hitting up on. You got any questions, Satya? You've been quiet over there.
No, I'm just absorbing because this is new stuff for me too. I mean, I know the headset based, the research going on in the headset based and computer vision aspects of things, but this browser based 3D worlds, these are kind of new to me. One thing that comes to mind is, before this we had websites like Second Life, right? And I mean, people said that those were very, very popular. I don't know a single friend who was on Second Life, right? So
quick interjection. Do you remember when there was an AP, or no, was it Reuters? I think Reuters had an embedded, like the comics writer Warren Ellis was covering Second Life for Reuters at one time. Go ahead, Satya.
Yeah, so that, I don't know whether it still exists, whether it has fizzled out or not. And, is this the second wave of that kind of technology? And where is it? Why do we think that it would be successful this time around? And many things happen like that, right? They are not successful the first time around. Like, look at all the DoorDash kind of, these kinds of, right? They were experimented. In 1999, they had experimented with all of these, options where people would get, supplies for free.
Cheapo delivery, yeah.
Cheap delivery, etc. They all failed. But now the same concept is coming back because things have changed, the technology has changed, maybe the supply chain has changed, whatever has changed quite substantially in 20 years, and now they become viable, at least,
not to mention the venture capital landscape has changed quite a bit
yes.
in 20 years as well.
Right. So what do you think? I mean, has something substantially changed?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think things definitely have changed. And I mean, even looking at Second Life, right? So Second Life is still around and still does, I believe, has, and I don't quote me on this, but I think their monthly recurring revenue is still in the millions, right? Like they're still a like actual, not necessarily a powerhouse, but they're like economically viable and like self-sustaining in a way that a lot of current other companies right now aren't. But again, I mean, if you roll back 20 years, like you didn't have things like VoIP integrated directly into these experiences, right? You didn't have the proliferation of like headsets that we're seeing right now. One of the things about these virtual worlds right now is the fact that they're accessible through desktop is fantastic, right? But as we see more adoption of headsets and more need for this kind of like easily accessible virtual worlds, that's just going to power the kind of add more fuel to the need for these virtual ecosystems. But at the end of the day, I don't think we can know for sure until, we look back 10 or 20 years from now to know whether this is another little wave before the like big wave or whether it is the big wave, right? But I think this is a really exciting opportunity to be experimenting with this technology. And if it is the time for this technology to really hit mainstream adoption, it'll happen. And if it's not, then we'll have learned a lot in the process. So,
right.
Well, shout out to my San Francisco neighbors, Linden Labs.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. So I think we are at the end of this webinar now.
Yeah.
And thank you so much, Jacob, for entertaining us and also telling us, educating us a lot about this new emerging technology. I sure want to go and explore more of what's out there. And thanks, Phil, for putting this all together. And thank you all, our fabulous audience, for being here. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah, thanks a lot, everybody. Next week, our guest will be another awesome OpenCV spatial AI contest team Robotic Elephant. Chris will be joining us to talk about another really cool project from that contest sponsored by Microsoft Azure and Intel.
Thanks so much for watching this episode of the webinar. Please hit that like button, subscribe, and don't forget to tap the little bell icon to be notified when new episodes drop. This week's episode was brought to you by OpenCV Courses. Learn computer vision and AI from the best at opencv.org/courses. If you'd like to be in the audience next week, subscribe to the OpenCV newsletter.